Greetings and welcome to this episode of Let's Create Something with Trapcode Form. Today we're going to create this nice hypnotic pendulum animation system with Trapcode Form inside of After Effects. If you never really had the occasion to mess around with rotation maps inside of Trapcode Form, follow along with me as we build this step by step. I think it'll be a great demonstration of rotation maps capabilities and a great exercise to learn about them. So we can once and for all demystify this Trapcode Form section of properties that we always skip because we're never really entirely sure of its purpose and how we would make it work properly. So, without losing any more time, let's get into After Effects and let's get started. So we'll start off by creating a new composition by hitting Ctrl N on the keyboard, and let's make this a standard resolution, so 1920 by 1080. And we don't need more than 720 frames. Let's call this Pendulum Form and hit OK. Right next to this action, we're going to create a new solid. So Ctrl Y and let's call this Form. Make sure it is the same size as our composition and hit OK. Next, we're going to go in the Effects and Preset panel, type in Form until we find it, and let's double click with our solid selected to apply it on there, and that's what we get with the basic form setup. So what I like to do when I first apply form to a layer, I like to set things up with the designer panel. That's before I start to keyframe it or play with layer maps. Let's open this up because we'll have some kind of a live panel running here, and we don't need 720 frames, so let's make this 180. And if we click on here, we can control the camera, reset the camera. So basically what we want is we want to distribute some points in the Z space. So we want only 1 point in X, we want only 1 point in Y as well. And for the Z, let's make it something like 12, just so we can see it better. Let's get in the particle type, set the particle feather to 0. And for the size, let's bring this up a little bit, up to 80. And basically this is what we have, some flat circles that are distributed along the Z axis, and we can change the size here if we want to add more space in between. So let's hit apply and boom, that's what we've got. Next, we are going to create our custom particle that we're going to feed in our Trapcode Form effect. In order to do that, we'll create a new composition, so Ctrl N, and this one, let's make it a little bit thin on the width, so 150 pixels, and for the height, let's make it twice as high as our current composition, so 1080 multiplied by 2. This should give us 2160 pixels. So let's hit OK, and what we'll have is some kind of a tall composition here in which we're going to make our pendulum shape. So in order to do that, let's first double click on the ellipse tool. That's going to create us a super tall ellipse, taking all the ratio of our composition. And if you don't want any stroke to it, let's shut the stroke, make sure this stroke is shut off, and we can change the color here, but let's make it white. Now let's twirl down the ellipse options here, so we can twirl down the ellipse path, uncheck this and make it proportional by setting the Y value to 150 here. That way our circle is a perfect circle sitting right at the middle of our composition. Next, we're going to add a rectangle shape. So let's click on add here and let's add a rectangle shape. We are going to drop this rectangle path into a group so we can have some anchor point settings. So let's create a group here. Here I have my path. Let's drag it into the group and let's call this rectangle. And let's shut off the ellipse for a moment. Here we have a simple square. Let's twirl down the options here for the rectangle path. Let's make it only 2 pixels for the width. And let's get down to the transform rectangle section here. For the anchor point, we want the bottom part to be sitting right at the middle of our composition. So the number we'll need to put in here is 50. And then we can uncheck this scaling here and make it taller by setting this up to 1000%. So let's get back our ellipse shape. And now what we have is some kind of a pendulum shape here, all in vector. Let's bring it down so the tip here matches the center of our composition. So let's select our whole shape layer and hit P, and let's bring this down. So let's open up our little title action save here so we can see where our composition center is, right there. So the number we'll need to put in here is 2080. That should make it right at the center. So let's get back in our main composition and let's call this one particle. Double click on pendulum form. We're back to this. Let's drag in our particle shape here, and basically this is what we've got here. We can shut it off because we don't need it to be visible here, since we're going to feed in the particle with this shape. So let's open up the particle here, and for the particle type, instead of sphere, let's set that to sprite. And right under texture, we're gonna assign our particle composition. It's gonna give us a little warning telling us that what we're using is really big to be used as a particle, but we don't care. Let's do it anyway. Hit OK, maybe twice. And now that's what we've got. Now, since it's centered at the middle of our composition, that's what we wanted, we need to bring it up. So let's open up the base form here, and let's set the Y value to 0. We can decrease the size of our particles here if it's going outside of our screen, something like 67. And here, that's what we've got. Next, what we want to do is start to create our rotation map, which is gonna tell our particles how to move in our animation. So let's do that. Let's create a new solid. So Control Y, and let's make this one 512 by 512, and let's call this rotation map. Hit OK. We can bring this over here, and on that we're gonna apply a ramp. So let's apply a ramp, and on top of that we're gonna add a colorama. Now we want to change the default rainbow colors by something else, so let's get inside the output cycle, and we're gonna go ahead and choose the Solarize Gray, and that's what we want. Let's create a quick animation for this. In the output phase, we're going to create a keyframe at frame 0 by hitting on the stopwatch for the phase shift. So let's create a keyframe here. Let's hit U, and let's get down to 180, and let's set that to 1, so it'll go 1 full revolution of phase shift. So that's what we should get. I can bring this on top of here, and right inside the form we are going to go down to the layer map section here, and on the rotate here we are going to set a map for the layer for Z. So let's twirl this down and select our rotation map. Now we want to also select effects and mask, and if for some reason you don't see this drop down menu here, you might have an older version of After Effects. In this case, what you would need to do here is just pre-comp this position with all the effects inside, but we're gonna keep on this method because I feel that it's quite easier for us to see the keyframe here at the same level where we're editing our form. So the time span, for the moment, let's set that to 0, and we wanted to map over XY time equals Z plus time. So let's select this option here, and for the strength, let's just put 45 for the moment. So all our particles are going to get right here, and if we go through our animation, they are starting to have some kind of emotion, but what we can notice right away is that they are only going to the left side. They're not. We wanted to go from this to this side like a pendulum. So what we need to do, we need to specify something to our particle rotation. So right here in our particle, right under the rotation section here, we have a whole section for this, and we can rotate them with this. We want to link this property to the layer map rotation strength. So let's try to do that, and we're gonna alt click on the stopwatch for the rotate Z, and this is going to create this. Let's pick up the pick whip here, and let's drag it all the way down to the strength here. And as we do that, this value here should be 45, like the same we set here. But for some reason, it seems that the programmers at Red Giant, I think they forgot to set this up so we can link this parameter here. So what we'll need to do to circumvent this issue here, let's delete this action here. We are going to create a custom slider here. So let's create ourselves a null. So Control-Alt-Shift-Y, and we can call this settings. And on this, we're going to apply a effect, expression controls, angle control. And this angle control is going to be our maximum angle. Let's set this to 45. And now we're going to just lock this down here so it doesn't disappear as we select our form layer. And we are going to link not our particle rotation, but our layer map here. Rotate. Our strength here, we want it to be the same as this number. So let's alt click on the stopwatch for the strength, and let's drag the pick whip right on this angle value here. And next we are going to link the rotation to this value instead of the strength, since it doesn't work. So let's alt click on the stopwatch here, and let's select our angle here. But we are going to add something. So at the end of the code here, just front slash, this is a division, so divided by 2, and let's hit home to get at the beginning of our line of code here, and we're going to add the minus sign. So this is going to make our value negative here, so minus 22.5. And if we get back to our animation now, it should go from one side to the other. Perfect. Next, since this is looping, let's go to frame 179 and let's hit N to have our work area only go up to frame 179, since the frame 180 is the same as the one at the beginning. So this is going to make it loop if we RAM preview this, and we might want to shut down our rotation map here. It's just a guide for us at this point. We don't need it to be visible for the particles to work. So this is going to make them move, first of all, at the same time and in a pretty linear fashion. So if we want to increase the height at which they go, we can simply increase the maximum angle. Let's put something like 60. Now they're going to start a little bit higher. Let's try 75. And even higher, they're going to go exactly to the same point when they flip to the other side. Now this linear motion, we want to change that. So we are going to create some keyframes on our rotation map here. So right where we had it phase shift from 0 to 1, instead of going from 0 to 1, we're going to go from 180 to 1 and 180 here. And let's get to frame 90 here, and let's create a keyframe right there. Now we're going to select all of those and right click on one of them and get into the keyframe assistant. We're going to click easy ease or F9, and now we can access the graph mode by clicking here, the graph editor. And we're going to change our curves a little bit. So right now they have a little bit of easing in their motion, but it's not the kind of easing that we want. So first, we're gonna make sure that we're not on the value graph here, but the speed graph here. This is what we want to control. And we could go ahead and drag these handle here, but we want to be super precise about that, since we want our motion to be real precise. So let's double click on this point here, and it's gonna open our little panel here. Instead of this value for the influence here, 33.3333, we're gonna multiply this value by 2. So multiply by 2, and it's 66.666666. Let's copy that here, and we're gonna paste the same value here on the outgoing velocity. So let's hit OK, and this should modify our curves here, and we're gonna do the same for the point at the beginning here. So let's double click on it, and here for the incoming velocity, instead of 333, we're gonna paste our value here, 666, and here we're gonna set that to 0. And is it that or the other way around? We'll verify that afterwards. So let's do the same right here. And let's type 0 for the incoming velocity and paste our value here. And let's see what we get. I don't think this is the right, like we want it at this point to be the slowest that it can be. So I think we reverted this here. So let's put 0 here and 66.6666 right there. This is how we want our curve to be. So let's do the same on the other side here. And sorry for that, I just inverted them, so let's correct that. And this is the kind of curve that we should get now. We can, if we play this back, now it's going to be, when it reaches the maximum angle, it's going to be at its slowest velocity, and when it's right in the middle here, it's going to go very, very fast. So now we have more, some kind of a nice fluid motion. The gravity is picking up now. So now that we've got that, we can set that to half to get it to work a little faster. We can go back to our form setting, and if we locked this down earlier, so we can just hit F3, and let's get down to the rotation maps. Where is the rotation maps? Down here for the time span. Now we can put something in there. If we increase this value here, it's going to offset the motion created by the rotation map for each particle. So if we set something like 1 here, it's gonna, they are going to be, there's going to be an offset, so it's going to create a nice visual motion there. And it's not gonna, as you can notice, it's not gonna loop. So if we check the frame 130, let's make a marker here, so shift 3, and let's look at the first frame, and there's a little bit of a difference here. They are already starting to move. So if we want to simply fix that, we have to make this phase shift animation loop. So to do that, we're gonna simply alt click on the already keyframe stopwatch here, and let's get in the options here, and we need to choose property, loop out type, cycle. And as soon as we do that, if we look at our first frame and our last frame, they are the same. So we can preview the motion. Pretty interesting. And if we change the value from the time span here, it's just going to create different patterns. If you want a lot of space in between their animation, let's put a bigger value. Now it's going to make this nice mesmerizing loop. And the way we set it up is pretty fun and practical, because it's always, whatever you put here is always going to loop perfectly. And let's try, there's a value that I like to try. So let me just do something, alt click here on the time span, and let's get JavaScript mat pi. This is going to feed in the number pi here for our offset. It's a pretty nice number to work with. It's kind of a mystical, magical numbers. So we can divide it by 2 if we want to have a smoother kind of an animation here. So that's pretty much the gist of it. And since we are here, we can just add a little bit of shadows to those by getting into the particle. And let's close this down. Let's open up the shading here, right under next one after particle. And let's open up the shadowlet. And what's new in later versions of Form is we can match the particle shape with our shadow here. Now we don't see it pretty much. Let's increase the opacity, and let's increase the softness a little bit. I said. And let's also increase the size as we start to see some kind of a shading here. So this is going to make our RAM preview a little bit harder to calculate. Just keep that in mind. And what else can we do here to make this more fun? We can always add some motion blur. It's gonna make it blurry following their motion. If they go faster, it's gonna be more blurry. So let's get down to motion blur here. And if for some reason that never does really work with the comp settings, so you can just force it on with this. And now this is really going to take a lot more time, but as you can see here, they are moving, so they are a little bit more blurry, and as they reach their final, like their maximum angle here, they're going really slow, so there's no blur at this point here. So nice little detail here, but I'm just gonna turn it off because it makes calculations a little bit more harder on the previews here. We could also have depth of field. So if we add a camera, Control Alt Shift C, and let's make it 50 millimeters. Quickly twice tap on A here, we can open up the depth of field, and let's crank the aperture here really strongly so we can see where it is. And let's bring the focus distance closer to us here. So let's bring it towards us. And there are some kind of issues with the depth of field and track code products. Now, maybe you don't have this issue here, but this is something that I've noticed when I try to enable this option here. It sometimes creates some weird lines here, so you might want to do some kind of manual Z map here to get better results. But if you just want to have something quick here, you can play around with this. If we rotate around, now you can see that our shapes are not really 3D, so they will always stay facing the camera. So if we would want something that we would be able to have in true 3D, we would just do the same setup, but instead of using a sprite, we might want to tell it to be a textured polygon. And let's just close down the turn off the shadow LED for a moment, and let's see. Oh, let's also turn off the depth of field from the camera, and let's set that back to half. And if I rotate with the camera now, as you can see, we can pivot around and they'll look 3D. Now, one last thing, maybe if we wanted to have something linking them all together, we might want to do something real simple here. Let's get inside the designer and let's create a new form, and this one also with one particle on X, one particle on Y, but this one with the Z particle, let's put 200. And let's make sure that we have the same value here for the size XYZ. We don't need it to be individual properties since we're only scaling it one direction. We only have one particle in X or Y, so we wouldn't, either way, we wouldn't be able to scale it. But let's put 650, 650. And yeah, since we're using a custom particle, it doesn't get displayed in this panel here. If we wanted to use that, there's some workaround. You simply would need to save your particle as a PNG with alpha, and then look up where this all the sprites from this are stored, and by right-clicking here you can see where they are in the folder, and just save your PNG in there, and that will make insert that when you work in the motion panel, you would see it get revealed, but we only see it in this mode here. So now what we just did is we just added this little line here on top, so they're attached together. All right, so that's pretty much all I wanted to show you today. I hope you enjoyed this little episode, and As always, thank you for watching and see you next time.